Massachusetts sends a military leader to Maine, and witch trial victims and families petition for restitution, including Elizabeth Johnson Jr. Welcome to the Salem Witch Hunt Daily Report for February 19th, 2024. I'm Josh Hutchinson. On February 19th, 1692, Major Elisha Hutchinson, no relation, rode to the eastward, Maine, to take command of troops deployed there in King William's War. 20 years later, February 19th, 1712, was a busy day. Elizabeth Johnson Jr. petitioned to have her name cleared as she and several other victims were omitted from the reversal of attainder legislation that had passed in October 1711. The others were Sarah Wardwell, Wilmot Red, Martha Scott, Anne Pudiator, Alice Parker, Elizabeth Proctor, Susanna Martin, and Bridget Bishop. However, Sarah Wardwell and Elizabeth Proctor had been cleared by legislation drafted back on May 26, 1703, and passed on July 27, 1703. So those two had been cleared. The others, it would take until 2001 to clear most of them, and Elizabeth Johnson Jr. was not cleared until 2022. So just 2 years ago, she was exonerated. Also on February 19th, 1712, Peter Osgood petitioned for restitution for Mary Osgood. Benjamin Proctor petitioned for restitution for himself. Samuel Wardwell Jr. petitioned for reversal of attainder and restitution for his mother, Sarah Wardwell. Evidently, the 1703 bill was inadequate, or word had not reached the families of the victims, as he felt like reversal of attainder was still required for his mother, even though she had been exonerated July 27, 1703. Also, Stephen Sewell wrote a summary of receipts of the relations and sufferers about the letters that had come in as petitions. And Stephen Sewell also wrote a list of receipts for the sums paid in restitution. And now I'll read from the petitions. This is the petition of Elizabeth Johnson Jr. To the Honorable the Gentlemen of the Committee sitting in Salem, February 19th, 1712. Whereas the Honorable General Court hath lately made an act for the taking off the attainder of those that were condemned for witchcraft in the year 1692, I thought meet to inform your honors that I was condemned by the court at Salem in January in the year 1693, as will appear by the records of the trials at said court, but my name is not inserted in said act, being very desirous of the favor of that act, embold humbly to pray your honors to represent my case to the general court at their next session, that my name may be inserted in the act, if it may be, and that the honorable court would please to allow me something in consideration of my charges by reason of my long imprisonment, which will be thankfully acknowledged as a great favor by your honor's most humble servant, Elizabeth Johnson Jr., Andover, February 1712. Next, we have the petition of Peter Osgood for restitution for Mary Osgood. To the Honorable Committee, Salem, February 19th, 1712. Gentlemen, in the dark and sorrowful times in the year 1692, when so many persons of undoubted credit were accused of witchcraft, our family, as well as others, was under great trouble, and it cost us very considerable in our necessary expense for our honored and tender mother during her imprisonment. Wherefore request of your honors to manifest it to the members of the general court that we might have some reasonable allowance for our charge therein, which will ever oblige your servant to pray. Peter Osgood, in the name of the rest of the family. And then we have the petition of Benjamin Proctor for restitution. Salem, February 19th, 1712, to the honored committee. The petition of Benjamin Proctor humbly showeth that, for as much as I, your petitioner, was imprisoned for several months in the time they called witchcraft, and was by that a great sufferer, for as much as I was the eldest son of my father, and worked hard with my father till I was about 30 years of age, and helped bring up all my father's children by all his wives, one after another. For as much as after my father's death, I, your petitioner, was at great cost and trouble in the disposition of my said father's affairs, as to the relieving his said family, some of them helpless, with answering debts, charges, legacies, etc. All which considered, your petitioner thinketh he deserves a greater share of this that the country hath been pleased to allow us than the rest of our family do, which I leave to your consideration of your honors, and shall forever remain your honor's most humble servant. And now we have an account of Samuel Wardwell Jr. To the Honorable the Gentleman of the Committee sitting at Salem, February 19th, 1712. Whereas my mother, Sarah Wardwell, was condemned by the court at Salem sometime in January in the year 1693, as I suppose will appear by the records of the trials at that court, but her name is not inserted in the late act of the general court for the taking of the attainder of those that were condemned in that year, my mother being since deceased. I thought it my duty to endeavor that her name may have the benefit of that act. I therefore humbly pray your honors to represent this case to the honorable general court, that my mother's name may be inserted in the said act. And whereas in the account which I gave to your honors when you met at Salem the last winter, I mentioned only what was seized of my father's estate by the sheriff, but gave no account of other charges which did arise from the imprisonment of my father and mother, they having provided for their own subsistence while they were in prison. And I suppose there was something considerable paid to the keeper of the prison, though I am not able now to give a particular account how much it was. If your honors please to allow me something upon that account, it will be thankfully acknowledged by your honor's most humble servant, Samuel Wardwell, February 19th, 1712. And finally, I'll read from an account of Stephen Sewell called Receipts for Sums Paid in Restitution, dated February 19th, 1712. Whereas His Excellency the Governor and General Council have been pleased to grant to the persons who were sufferers in the year 1692 some considerable allowance toward restitution with respect to what they suffered in their estates at that sorrowful time, and have also appointed a committee, viz., John Appleton, Esquire, Thomas Noyes, Esquire, John Burrell, Esquire, Nehemiah Jewett, Esquire, and Stephen Sewell, to distribute the same to and amongst the parties concerned, as in and by the records and court orders may appear. Now know ye that we, the subscribers hereunto, being either the proper parties, or such as represent them, or have full power and authority from them to receive their parts and shares, do acknowledge to have received of, and from the said committee, the several sums set against our respective names, in full of our parts and shares of the money aforesaid, and such of us as have orders from some of the parties concerned to receive their parts and shares, do avouch them to be real and good, so that for whomsoever we take upon us to receive any such sum, we do oblige ourselves to indemnify the said committee to all intents, constructions, and purposes, we say, received this 19th day of February, Anno Domini 1712. That's all for today's Salem Witch Hunt Daily Report. Tune in tomorrow for the February 20th Daily Report. Thank you. Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.